Hey guys. So my friend Reed from Discord was kind enough to send out his Pulsar Xlite wireless V2 for me to have a go at and see what I think of it compared to the previous version. I did own a V1 Xlite wireless. It was a good mouse, but I had some misunderstandings with the shape at the time that I think prevented me from appreciating it as much as I might have. And there were some specific things about that mouse that really did not suit my preferences very much. So I wanted to take a look at the updated model, see what changed, kind of have a fresh go at it, and give you guys my 2 cents on where it fits in and what I think it does in the current mouse market. So, basics. This guy is almost sort of the perfect size for my hands for what I call this more old school type of right-handed mouse shape. You know, the EC IntelliMouse type of shape. Um, it's not quite as big as I would like it to be. My pinky's just a little bit cramped over here. My thumb feels like it sits slightly far forward of where I'd like it to be. You know, some relatively minor stuff. But overall, it's a pretty good fit for my hands. And so I think, you know, if almost anybody is qualified to talk shape on this thing, I'm probably about as good as the next guy. So, um, when I tried this mouse before, I think it was around the same time I was trying the Outset originally. And I had also been using the G703. And one thing that both this mouse and that Logitech mouse do is they do an excellent job of having the flare on the back left fill up the very base of where your thumb meets the rest of your hand extremely well. And as a result, I was very used to that type of feeling. So when I got the Xlite, I hadn't used an EC2 shape in quite some time, and so I wasn't making a conscious attempt to use a grip that suits this mouse. I was just doing more of what I did with this, mainly because I thought mistakenly that this mouse was less different to this than it actually was. And so rather than hold this mouse the way that I do now, the way that it makes sense to for this shape, what I wanted to do was replicate that sense of it filling up this pocket at the base of my thumb. And so I essentially twisted the mouse this way to try and shove this back left corner further into the base of my thumb. And as a result, it did two things. First of all, it made my thumb's placement on the side of the mouse closer to being right in between those two thumb buttons where I want it to be. And it gave me more of a feeling of filling up the base of my thumb. But can you see how far forward that bend actually is? It didn't just fill up the base of my thumb, it then proceeded to try to fill up this part of my hand very aggressively. And so when trying to hold the mouse this way, it started to feel quite uncomfortable, particularly when I pull the mouse back into my palm, because it would really push right here with this bit of the hump. And it felt really obstructive and awkward. And so I became frustrated with the shape quite quickly. In reality, the EC has a flatter left side here than the Outset does, and it's not designed to be shoved into that little pocket of your hand the same way. You end up with a little bit of a gap between your thumb and the side of the mouse, or at least I do. And as a consequence, it doesn't push on this bit of your thumb so much. It comes back here, sits in the middle of your palm, and fills up this bit more thoroughly. If you hold it like that, it makes a lot more sense. And it's a lot more comfortable. In fact, if you aren't trying to sort of choke up on the hump of the mouse, the length is pretty good as far as my thumb placement. But I guess I would still say my sense of this mouse is, at best, it's sort of the G Pro wireless shape of Ergomice. And by that I mean it does work well for a lot of people. And there are a number of people out there who really, really, really like it. But for me and for a lot of other people, I would not say that it's perfect, and it definitely still has areas that can be improved. Essentially, when I hold this mouse, it is making very solid contact from pretty much the back of my palm here all the way up to the underside of my knuckles. In fact, it's making such good palm contact up here that it physically, as my hand rests on the hump of this mouse, it is smooshing the skin underneath my knuckles forward like this. And so as my fingers curl to grip the mouse, there's a little bit of tension in that seam right there. And it actually makes the hump of the mouse feel larger than it is, because parts of my hand, which are not directly in contact with the hump of the mouse, are actually feeling like they're being pushed upward, like there's a bit of hump there that's supporting them. So I end up with an extremely large area of palm contact. But because the EC2 is sort of in this weird, it's not weird, but it's essentially halfway between the Outset's hump and like something like an IntelliMouse's hump. It's slightly steeper, but it's not quite as rounded, blah, blah, blah. It does give an extremely even distribution of pressure across basically the whole area it's making palm contact with. And that's a really nice thing, to be honest. In terms of, distributing force across your palm, I think it arguably does the best job of any ergo shape that I've tried. But that does come with drawbacks. In comparison to this mouse, when I use the Outset, it concentrates the palm contact in a smaller area, sort of in the pocket of my palm here. And as a result, I have a lot more freedom of movement. I can push my fingers further forward. I can bend my knuckles more this way because they're not being impinged on by smooshed skin. Anyway, as a consequence, I can actually do a better job of freeing the mouse up from my grip, pushing it forward. It doesn't contact with the base of my palm down here the same way. There's less contact here. As a result, there's a smaller surface area. It's easier for me to overcome the friction of the mouse against my palm than it is with something as large and contacting as large of an area as the Xlite does. As a consequence, it's easier for me to get the mouse pushed away from my palm, and once it's out there, I have more mobility with the mouse. The shorter base and the more natural ability to get my fingers sitting a little bit further back on the mouse, just because the front drops away a bit more aggressively than the EC2 does due to that more rearward hump placement. As a consequence, this mouse feels like it fits me more intuitively. fills up that pocket there. Front right corner tucks in a little bit more, helps me lift the front of the mouse and steer it. Small things like this. But there is one cheat code that no amount of shape engineering is going to overcome, and that is 25 grams less weight. Yeah, basically it doesn't matter because I can just move my hand faster and I can pick the mouse up just as well. You know, the fact that the Xlite is this light and still feels this well built is one of those sort of like you start thinking about mice like a video game sometimes where it's like, oh, they got to have trade-offs, right? If you're going to gain in terms of shape, it has to have some drawback, right? So the best shape on the market is a slightly heavy and outdated mouse, it still has a cable and blah blah blah. But this is still a really good shape. And when you add in how light this mouse is, you just turn your sense down a little bit and move your arm further, you know? um, so it's like I said, it's basically the GPX of Ergonomics. Um, it doesn't quite matter that it's not the ideal shape for everybody because there's no cable and it's like 60 grams. So it just sort of overcomes certain limitations from the shape by virtue of making them cease to be a problem the way that they would be in other shells. And not only that, but a lot of the things about the Xlite that really used to bug me have genuinely been fixed. The weight is nowhere near as front heavy as it used to be. So, yes, it's a hair more awkward to pick up because the back is trying to droop slightly, but the front of the mouse is so much easier to steer. I could care less, like it's literally I genuinely like this weight balancing. I'll leave it at that. It's really good. It's close to how I have my G703 set up after I moved its battery further back. So I like it. Similarly, these main clicks, the V1, they were massively over tensioned, and especially if you click towards the front of the mouse, a lot of the times they wouldn't rebound properly, and a lot of the tactility would disappear. They just feel kind of dead. These are significantly better. I'm not going to say they match an outset or something, but they are no longer actively inhibiting me from enjoying the use of this mouse. Same thing with the thumb buttons. You can actually hear and feel them now, which is nice. And the scroll click is genuinely good. I wish the scroll steps were slightly more defined, but the click is quite nice. In addition to the removal of the holes on the side and this additional brace across the bottom, the Xlite has reached a point now where, despite how it looks with the visible holes on it, this is genuinely a mouse that feels of good quality. And between that feeling with the low weight, the excellent performance, and having systematically improved the clicks, the placement or lack thereof of holes, the bracing on the bottom of the shell, the weight balancing, they've made significant improvements to the areas of the mouse that were the most frustrating for me in the past. And as a result, nothing about this mouse is bad enough to be actively frustrating. It's not my favorite mouse, but nothing about it gives me reason to get annoyed in any meaningful sense. And that is pretty much the reason why it makes such a great recommendation for a lot of people. There's very little about this mouse that will cause somebody to arbitrarily grow to hate it. It may be too big for you, or you may just not like the shape, and that's fair. But as far as shapes of this type go, and as far as mice of this type go, it's quite middle of the road. It works for a large number of people. It is unlikely to be, actively problematic for most people who try it. And with the lightweight and the wireless, yeah, it's the GPX of Ergomice. I really couldn't call the last one that, in fairness, because it had too many issues for me, and I just didn't feel high enough quality to really be competitive with that mouse. But this one is. I'm not going to say it's as good or better, but it's close enough that you can genuinely talk about it in the same type of context. I don't think anybody who gets this mouse is going to try it and go, yeah, no, that feels too cheap for me, um, I don't think anybody is going to try this mouse and say, no, the performance doesn't stack up, or no, the buttons are not good enough for me to even consider using this mouse due to all the other benefits it has. It went from being something that was really good on paper, and yet I was underwhelmed by in person, to being something that I start actively looking for reasons to not like this mouse. Not because I'm biased against it, but because it's so rare that you get something which is this unobjectionable, and that isn't compensating for certain character flaws with other strengths. It's basically, it's an update. It's a V2 of the Xlite in the best way. It's in the sort of, to analog to like cars, it's the Porsche approach of continually refining something to whittle away at all the things that, the flaws that it has, without totally getting rid of the things that made it good to start with. They didn't do anything to this mouse that somebody who liked the V1 model would say, oh, this ruined the mouse for me. And yet they've managed to identify the areas where it was weakest and noticeably improve them. And as a consequence, it becomes very difficult to pick holes in this mouse without taking a stance of being so overtly biased against it and wanting to find any reason to recommend an alternative product, that you start to look ridiculous. If I read a recommendation post and the guy specifically says something, oh, I hate the EC, or, oh, I need a rear hump, I'm not going to tell him buy the Xlite, right? But for people who are like, I don't know, I like ergos, or I want to try an ergo, it's like, what are you seriously going to recommend that's better value, and in most cases, you know, what are you going to recommend that's a better mouse that's an ergo? Not to mention being better value. So, yeah, that's cool. It's cool because it's so frustratingly problem free. And that was something that the ergo sort of genre didn't really have for a long time. It was always a question of trade offs: quality versus weight versus shape versus click feel. Get a steel series and maybe you like the shape, but everything else is, you need light clicks, but you want optical switches and you don't like mushy buttons. Well, pick your poison. And I know there are reports of these double clicking out of the box. I know there are other, issues that people will run into with them. But for how popular the mouse is already, there aren't that many people complaining about it. Not really. And that's impressive. Anyway, I'm sure I've basically said the same thing over and over enough times. Um, let's talk Superglides real quick. I will probably put out another video on these later to put some more detail into them. Essentially, my experience mirrors what House Gaming said in his video on like his I used Superglides for a long time. Here's what I think of them video. I haven't noticed any slowdown with these. I haven't used them enough to get to that point. But everything about having basically no static friction and the amount of weight you put into the pad through the mouse almost not changing the friction at all, that's pretty accurate to my experience. And it makes for a very unique feeling. I have to add as context, I performed equally well in AIM Lab today with this completely stock G Pro wireless as I did with this Xlite with Superglides. Now that is not an indictment against anything to do with this mouse. It's simply that for me, as long as the shape is reasonably good and the weight is under 90 grams, I can compensate for basically anything else about the mouse, and I will be able to play near or at the best that I can play. The reason that I say that is, to me, it doesn't matter that I don't have any objective case in which these improve my performance over PTFE skates. Will I go out and buy Superglides for my own mice? Probably not. But these do something fun, which is give you a different experience. They change the way that using your mouse on the same pad feels compared to every other mouse with Teflon skates. They make it significantly easier to change direction in tracking activities, right? There are specific things that Superglides do that you just can't get with a Teflon skate. And so if I'm a mouse enthusiast, what I'm saying is I am not choosing to buy something specifically because I genuinely think it will make me a better gamer. I'm choosing them because I like something about what it offers. And in this case, it offers something very unique in the glide experience and how it feels to game with these skates as opposed to other options that are more traditional. So, should you buy them? Well, do you have a hankering for a new or different experience, right? Do you have $25 to throw at making your pad feel different, but without buying a new pad? Specifically, I would say if you're somebody who owns multiple mouse pads or multiple mice already, I think you're more likely to appreciate and enjoy Superglides because you have a broader spectrum of experience that you can compare it to. If you're somebody buying your first mouse, your first, enthusiast level pad, and you're like, let me get Superglides, in my mind, you're missing the point. You're going to end up with one experience, which is a pad that feels completely smooth and has no feedback, a mouse which would have felt virtually the same in terms of glide on any pad you bought almost. Um, and so the whole point of researching or trying a good mouse pad has now been totally lost on you. But instead, you're stuck with these skates that you have to worry about slowing down over time, that you maybe have to get ceramic coating and apply it to preserve the speed. And if you go out and buy another mouse pad and you're still only using one mouse of Superglides, it's going to feel almost exactly the same. So that's where I'm saying I don't think it makes sense, because the skates cost about as much as a mouse pad does. So why not have Teflon skates and two different mouse pads that offer you different things so you can enjoy both of them, instead of one mouse pad and then one pair of skates that makes buying other mouse pads in the future an entirely pointless endeavor. It just takes away from the potential to enjoy new experiences, in my opinion, if you're in that situation. So, yeah, if you're somebody who's already an enthusiast, Superglides are cool. And there's a reason why so many of the people that have been in the subreddit, in the community for a longer time, tried them, enjoyed them, are choosing to continue to use them despite the known issues. And I think it's based around the different experience that they offer rather than any objective measure of performance. Now, there are also those out there in the community who just really, really like speedy glide and minimal friction. And they go, yep, this is what I wanted. And cool. If that's what they wanted, great. Um, but I think for most people, unless you know that you are that type of I want speed, speed, and only speed person, I would not buy Superglides until you already have a little pocket collection that you are happy with and that you feel like you're not really inclined to buy more mice or mouse pads, and yet you want a new experience. I think that's where these really shine. All right. Hopefully that was helpful, guys. If you have any questions about the shape stuff, let me know. Per usual, I'm doing my best to describe the differences between the mice, but um, I probably missed stuff. So yeah, if you have questions, let me know. Um, as far as the mouse itself, I think pretty much what I said is self-explanatory, and it seems very similar to what you'll hear from other reviews of the mouse. That's not me being lazy. I just think that it's a particular product, which is easy to describe because it's very similar to something that already exists, just better. So if it felt slightly underwhelming in terms of review content outside of the shape comparison, sorry. I just don't think that there's that much to say about the Xlite V2 as opposed to like a totally new mouse. And if you have questions about Superglides, I will try to answer them. Again, I've only used them for a couple days. I'm not an expert by any means, and I probably will not have this mouse for very long because it does need to go to its home, which is not my house. So anyway, I hope you guys are having a good day. Thanks for watching the video. Please consider leaving a like if you enjoyed it. And I will say I have some bigger projects that I'm working on right now, so please look forward to those in the future. And if you have an interest in seeing what I'm up to, perhaps click the subscribe button. All right, thanks, guys. See you in the next one.